the chaos of life like when you can identify the voice of God. If you don't know the voice of God, it's difficult to get the blessing. Every child of God, the Bible says, they that are led by the Spirit, in the book of Romans, they that are led by the Spirit are the sons of God. You can't get the Spirit leading if you cannot hear the voice of God. Christianity is difficult for many people. Some people live their life by guesswork because they can't hear the voice of God. Please, ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you this morning that hearing the voice of the Lord is not just for the pastor. Hearing the voice of the Lord is not just for the prophet. Hearing the voice of God or being able to know when God is speaking is a necessity for every believer. And so everyone preparing for the blessing must be sensitive to know when God is speaking. Which means it is a responsibility of every child of God to activate your spiritual senses to the level where you can connect with your Father. My sheep hear my voice, and I know the voices of my sheep. So in your walk with God, communicating with the Father is not a one-way traffic. You must be able to hear him, and he should be able to hear you. I mean, no matter what it would take for you, even if it means disciplining yourself to sit and study on how to hear the voice of God, it is very important to invest on knowing how to hear the voice of God. There are people whom God has brought blessings for, but because they couldn't hear him, they couldn't get it. If you read first lines of verse 7 and then first lines of verse 8, you will discover that the voice of God was heard, and God spoke to Israel. And God spoke to Israel. 70 years in Babylon, 70 years of pain. What took them out was the voice of God. I mean, what took them out of the pain? I don't know if I'm communicating. What announced their blessing was the voice of God. You need to hear God's voice for the week. You need to hear God's voice for the month. You need to hear God's voice concerning that business. You need to hear God's voice concerning that atmosphere around your life. It is not good to be too depressed that you can't hear God's voice. Have you ever known that sometimes when you are very depressed, if you are not careful, you can't hear any voice any longer? One thing depression does to a person is that it shuts down your spiritual senses. I pray for somebody here. It doesn't matter the seasons of over your life. May you not miss your Father's voice. Oh, Rabababosha. I say it doesn't matter the seasons your family is going through. I declare and decree you will not miss the voice of God. You will not miss the voice of God. The voice of God is the voice of divine visitation. And so it is important to hear the voice of God, because every time you hear the voice of God, God has visited you. Every time you hear the voice of God over that issue, God has visited that issue. And God can visit an issue and it remains this. I don't know if I'm talking to somebody here. I don't know. I came to prophesy to people here this morning. The voice of God is leaving the altar into that situation of your life. And I declare total change and a turnaround. The voice of God coming for you to hear the voice this morning. And I declare that your spiritual senses are open. Somebody say loud amen. You're the one I'm talking to.